You're listening to the Security VIP podcast, hosted by Taylor May, the official podcast of the security industry and home of nothing but the truth.
You think you know me?
Time to play the game. Time to play the game.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Security VIP podcast, the official podcast of the security industry and home of nothing but the truth. As always, I'm your host, Taylor May, and on today's episode, we are sitting down with the leading OEM distributor in the industry. With the 50,000 square foot facility in Irvine, California, the team at Velasea is bridging the gap for end users across the nation because of their knowledge in computer vision, artificial intelligence, physical security, and hardware that is second to none. However, Velasea is not the only thing we're going to highlight today on Security VIP. That's right. We're also fortunate to have the IceMan himself, Mr. Dave Clark, join us for today's discussion. And yes, I promise to give an explanation to my viewers and listeners today on why I call Dave the IceMan. So with that being said, it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce Mr. Brian Collins, Mr. Jimmy Whalen, and Mr. Dave Clark to the Security VIP podcast today. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Doing great. Thanks, Taylor.
Good to be here.
Appreciate you guys for hopping on. You guys know what this podcast is all about. It's all about nothing but the truth. And that's what these listeners and my viewers love to hear about Security VIP, is highlighting key professionals in their space. So let's start with Jimmy first before we touch base on Velasea and what the company specializes in. So Jimmy, kind of give us your background, man, your experience, and then we'll follow it with Brian and Dave.
I've been in the IT industry for about 20 years. We founded the original company, which is a company called Arbitech, in 2000. So Velasea is a spinoff of Arbitech. Arbitech started out as being an independent IT distributor. Had some pretty good success over the years, got up to be around $200 million, and has since been evolving by becoming more of a conglomerate, in the sense that Arbitech still has its traditional brand in the sense of being an IT distributor. But we have basically launched several companies under the same kind of a warehouse or same operational capacity. So we have a 60,000 square foot building, about 95 employees, combined revenue somewhere around $150 million, with about 5 different businesses that organize within, or that operate within the same organization by utilizing efficiencies. And basically that's the model we're going to continue to go down the path of. I'm actually one of the original founding members, I should say, of Arbitech. So been here since day one. Recently took over the CEO and president role of the entire organization, all the organizations. So that's a little bit about me. Grew up in Philadelphia, moved out to California about 20 years ago, and kind of found a home. So
love to hear that knowledge, and congrats again, Jimmy, on the new promotion and taking over as the boss man now of Velasea and Arbitech. So definitely appreciate that in your wealth of experience. And Brian, what about you, man? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I started my technology career like most people, and that was by jumping out of helicopters in the military, which was just kind of a natural progression. No, I'm the CTO here for Velasea. I also operate as a lead engineer and director of engineering on the Arbitech side as well. My career with technology goes back to probably the early to mid 90s, when the internet was just emerging, and things like Ethernet were kind of relatively unknown technologies. I did have a career in the military for a number of years, and from there moved into the startup space with the .com boom. Did a number of startups. I've been involved in technologies from development efforts to crawling through ceilings, putting infrastructure in to run an IT operations, designing data centers. I've been a part of the VAR space for a long time, and I've even spent quite a bit of time in the construction space around data center type building operations and things like that from like a contractor level. So it's always been really important for me as a technologist to really understand the broad scope and the foundational scopes of what it is we're growing towards. And here at Velasea, I've been able to be a part of Jimmy's vision. Jimmy and I go back, it's probably going on 15 years now, where I used to be a customer with some of the Arbortech type business, and Jimmy and I started working in the security technology space and things like that, pretty much in parallel, where Jimmy was working on the supply side of things and I was working on the design side. And about 2 years ago, it just seemed like a good matchup for us to get together and lead the efforts here at Velasea. So we're involved. I consider myself a dot connector. So when it comes to building a proper system or set of systems to deliver the right kind of performance that somebody's going to need, reliability, all the considerations that it takes around enterprise architecture and things like that, we work on the engineering side to make sure that those things fit as perfect as possible for this new landscape of technology.
Connecting the dots. And speaking of engineering, let's talk about Dave Clark for a second. Dave, introduce yourself, man, and tell us about your experience in the industry.
Oh, man, it goes back a long ways. I want to say I've been working professionally in IT for about 25 years. I've been playing with computers since the mid-'80s. Was one of the lucky kids to grow up with it and be kind of the first generation of having the personal computer around the house. Kind of some professional highlights is started in the security industry with IceMan and set up their tech support program, and then went over to the cybersecurity space with Logarithm for a couple of years, and then I've been the lead field engineer for AnyVision for the last 2 years. And my job, in amongst creating all of our deployments and executing our software, is keeping folks like Taylor honest and being their technical conscience, so they we speak the truth and get the right design it right, set the expectation right, and deliver it on time. I think that concept and that framework is what I really bring to it, is making sure we get there on time. And as I tell Taylor, we get it there on time, the ice doesn't melt.
It's one of the reasons why I call Dave the Iceman, and I'm going to touch base on the Iceman here in a second for my listeners and viewers today. But for my followers today, you guys can hear the wealth of experience and knowledge that all these three guys share, obviously way above my experience in the industry, which is why I wanted to have them on this podcast series. So let's talk about Velasea here, Jimmy. What does the company do? What does the company specialize in? Tell us more about what Velasea is here in the industry.
Yeah, so I'll just go back. So basically, we got into the security business on the Arbortech side in 2011, and mainly in the casino side. Got pretty focused on working in Vegas and outside in some of the Indian casino environment through some relationships we had. That expanded in 2015-16 when we basically took on a project to prove that the Honeywell legacy system worked in a VM environment, which was really kind of evolving what security was at that time. Legacy systems and historically security has been a little slow to adopt new technologies, specifically because it's not fundamentally an IT environment historically. It's more based on security guards and people and operators in terms of simple is better. So after proving that, we created some relationships, some more significant relationships, and then the shooting in Las Vegas on October 17th kind of changed the path that we were on. We had a significant involvement in assisting the MGM in that incident, and basically then the change there became how MGM looked at kind of security and surveillance and became a kind of an incubator for computer vision. And specifically, that's how we got introduced to AnyVision. And at the time, really new age computer vision or GPU-based AI type computer vision was really still in its infancy, because NVIDIA, who really drove the market in terms of compute side, software development was there, but the compute really didn't provide the ability to kind of drive those algorithms from an efficiency standpoint. And that's how we got engaged with AnyVision and team, and designing systems around how computer vision really affects the system, which is quite different than data sets from an AI perspective. So we got a little niche in terms of really being able to understand the utilization ratios between CPU, GPU, and other components within the system, which is quite a bit different than data. Video presented to systems is different than data presented to systems, mainly due to the rendering back and forth in terms of how it's presented via the operator and in real time relative to forensically. So that niche has kind of been somewhere where we've kind of hung our hat. We do build quite a bit of VMS systems, but our focus is really around computer vision and the future of security. We believe that computer vision use cases are going to be the factor that drives the value of video into the future. And so we differentiate ourselves from OEMs out there by having expertise and an ability to shift on the fly in terms of how we build those systems relative to whatever the bottlenecks are for the particular computer vision, whether that be T-flops, all the GPU RAM, CPU cores, whatever it might be, knowing the formulas between how the software works and being able to adapt on the fly to build a cost-effective solution, whether that be on the edge, true edge in the sense of out in a NEMA box or something along those lines, or in a on-premise data center, or some type of hybrid between the two. So we are a system builder. We've been around not too long, for about 2 years now. We've been selling products, but we're a startup that isn't a startup in the sense that we've only been actually selling under the Velasea name for 2 years. But as I mentioned, the company itself has existed for 20 years. Very hands-on. Very much a relationship-based organization. We have no problem consulting and supporting people up front. We're here to help, and really just support the growth of these organizations, no matter how big or small from a computer vision perspective. It's really about partnering with organizations and kind of see where the landscape goes, because it's a very fragmented industry. There's a lot of players out there right now, and what computer vision looks like in the future is still undetermined. And that's really our play, really looking for the future as opposed to constantly needing to sell a countless number of boxes to keep the organization running. We're in the privileged position of having been profitable for 20 years. So our growth ratio for Velasea is more of a betting on the future, as opposed to constantly needing to transact as many possible deals on a monthly basis. So it's really about supporting ISVs for the future, and understanding what those use cases are, and understanding the market in terms of assisting them to position themselves properly to execute.
A lot of good points that Jimmy brought up there, guys, and especially when it comes to artificial intelligence and computer vision, it's still so new in our industry. We've seen this industry evolve quite over the years. I know Dave has seen this industry evolve quite frankly too. But when we talk about computer vision and AI and facial recognition, body recognition, people counting, when it comes to things of that nature, it's very important to partner with the right manufacturer, partner with the right distributor, integrator, etc. when it comes to these kind of analytics that you're looking for, which is why I want to give a shout out to Velasea real quick, because if you guys missed my last episode, I had Eddie Collier of MGM Resorts, and also had Josh Anderson and John Underwood of Cherokee Nation. These are both clients of Velasea and are clients of AnyVision that Dave and I work for. And what both of those guys said is they trusted Velasea to provide the right hardware and architecture on the back end of running those analytics. Now, I'm not saying that Dell can't do this, or HP can't do this, or Cisco can't do this, but when it comes to these NVIDIA drivers, these GPU consumption drivers, it's very important to focus on the right partners in the space that actually specialize and have the expertise in that swim lane, which is what Velasea highlighted on, or Jimmy highlighted on here at Velasea. So Brian, going off of that, my next question is for Brian and Dave. When we talk about computer vision technology, what are some of the challenges you see on the back end of the hardware side when it comes to running these certain kind of analytics? What are you seeing?
Well, there's a lot of challenges. I mean, this is still, I still consider the technology in its infancy. There's some amazing companies. AnyVision, I'm going to have to sing your praises. AnyVision has phenomenal software that have been accepted in, very large industries. That being said, it's very challenging to get, technology like that into the hands of where the demand lies, I guess. Most of that is probably cost driven, and a lot of that is also based on effectiveness of the different technologies in the machine learning systems, right? So you may have a system that's really good at facial recognition, another system that's really good at object detection, and you'd have to, mortgage, a few houses to bring both the best of breed technologies in. So there's that challenge. The other challenge where, Jimmy had mentioned, our customers are the ISVs or the software startup companies. And you could have a room full of PhDs that just can create amazing algorithms and machine learning components and inference engines and things like that, and not understand what the enterprise is going to demand from a deployment and reliability standard and a supportability standard. That's a very important thing.
Yep. Can I jump in and add on that? Because that's where the bridge between us two parties come in. Is I'm that interface between our research department and then actually making this a customer facing product as the tech support guy and as the engineer. And you guys have been as critical in helping us package a product that is easy to use for the end customer to consume, and making it an easier to use package. And I think that's a huge, value add of working with a partner in defining this, because it's a very technical thing to bring different bits of computing and very high-end computing to a space that, like Jimmy mentioned, isn't even really in the IT space yet. And bridging all these different gaps is where you're going to need some help.
Yeah. And if you look at, some of the vendors, they tend to focus on general purpose type systems, the systems that meet 80% of the market demand. And in some cases, we have to use those, and we have to build those out in a way that it will fit with this emerging market technology that may not see as much immediate demand. But if you look, a little bit in the future, there's some high demand. So we will find ourselves, in the lab actually bringing in technologies that would, basically be able to accomplish what needs to be accomplished within a certain form factor. Or we'll also work with the end users if there's a large deployment. We have a very deep understanding of centralized storage, cloud computing, as well as the compute network infrastructures, implications around those for performance. It's just really important for us to understand those things, and then also understand that there's a very large market demand at the lower end, or the entry level, or the small business level, if you will, that just haven't seen the cost of compute come down low enough to where they can start realizing those benefits. But we're very close to that, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, this is an entirely different animal than your video storage, your VMS, the stuff that probably most of the people are used to that are not compute intensive, and it's a completely different animal when you get into computer vision analytics on what we take to and require from a hardware requirement standpoint to be meshed in. We're trying to mesh into the same area and ecosystem, but it's a different animal. It's sort of like the difference between you've got your Ford pickup truck that's pretty standard and everybody's used to using. That's your VMS, and we're in the kind of the exotic high performance auto industry still, and we got to merge the two.
Yeah, one of the things that gets overlooked too is just the impact of deploying these. So in your traditional surveillance world, you have an 11-foot high to 12-foot high camera. Here, you need a 7 to 9 foot, right? And the light sensitivity and the use case in terms of how everything is deployed, it totally is underestimated in terms of this is not. None of these solutions are plug and play. They all take work to make it give you the information back that you're really trying to get. So a lot of it too is educating the customer, whether that be the system integrator or the end user, in terms of how to actually functionally take these products and actually get the results that you want. Because if you think that you're just going to be able to buy computer vision, plug it in, and have it work, that's just not real, right? So that's the struggle we all face, right? And that's a part of our job as well, to make sure that we adequately educate the customer and assist them in making sure that whatever they do purchase, any vision or any type of computer vision, that they truly understand what it takes for them to get the results. Because ultimately, hardware and software performance relative to the brand is also key in terms of how these things are deployed, and making sure that we all get the benefit of success based on how the stuff is in the field. Because if it doesn't work, then it's a knock on both of us. So that, I think, is one of the biggest struggles out there, is just trying to get people to the point where they can deploy these products to actually get the results they want. And each component is hugely important in terms of that success.
And that's the problem, guys. And Jimmy just spoke of what I was going to say anyway, is clients get these specs for computer vision and they think they can just pull it off the shelf from a hardware provider like Dell or HP, like an all-in-one box. And they can't. So Jimmy and Brian, what's that message to customers, man, when it comes to computer vision? Why would they even, choose you guys when it comes to this technology? Why can't I get this question all the time? Taylor, I send my specs with Dave, and I send our specs to a customer and say, okay, yeah, we can go to Dell, we can get these specs. But when Dell tries to put the specs into a box, it doesn't work. And this is the problem, guys. I can't express this, passion enough. So Jimmy and Brown, what's that messaging to a client if they don't really understand what it takes to actually build these kind of boxes and GPU consumptions and cards? What's the message you guys say when it delivers these analytics?
It's two-pronged. No, number one is there's quite a few configurations that we're able to build that are not actually orderable from the manufacturer. So as an OEM, you get what are called intakes or special dispensation to be able to deploy certain systems, because you test them in certain environments to allow heat or throughput or whatever it might be, to get special authorizations for the specific use case. Most of the systems that we build are industry standard percentages from a chassis perspective, but definitely not industry standard in terms of how they're designed from a component level. And really, this is an algebra problem in terms of how you figure out the camera count relative to the actual design. And the problem in itself relative to computer vision is so much different than it is when it comes to data. And it's such a small niche that there's few people that fundamentally understand how these systems can basically be put together. And when you take it to the manufacturer, this is going to be one of the first times that most of these people that you deal with are going to have ever dealt with a computer vision system. And if they take their knowledge base, which is not wrong, it's right for the environment that they live in, and they try and build a system like this, they just fundamentally are not going to be able to understand what's driving the decision making in terms of how people actually make these decisions. So, one of the things is, if you look in the IT world, total cost of ownership is a big factor. Power consumption, all these kinds of things come into play when it comes to how people make these decisions. But in security, it's a budget, right? And you have a security guy who has a budget, and that's the power is not in the guy's budget, right? So when you lay that out to the guy who's making the decision, he might choose something that has a higher total cost of ownership because his budget is what he's trying to hit. He doesn't care about the long-term cost of it relative to the power consumption. And that has a lot to do with GPU cards in terms of how you make those choices. So it's important for us, when we have those conversations, to understand what's the driving factors in terms of the decision for that particular deployment, And then that actually drives us towards the actual design of the particular device in that time, in that case. And we're flexible enough to basically be able to shift these designs on the fly. And we're knowledgeable enough to understand the variables within these particular conversations to basically be able to shift and say, okay, well, in this sense, if you're more worried about, total cost of ownership, or you're more worried about, I need the lowest cost per camera right now today. And if the thing is, as loud as an airplane, I don't care, because, it gets me the software that I need and it works. Right. So there's little things inside these types of conversations, and sometimes people just go and they take what they think they know and they either dumb it down or they use a gamer card, which is another problem. Yep. Right. So, there's a lot of people out there trying to save money by using the 2080 cards, or now the 30, the new version. I can't remember off my head what the number was, but those they're not even authorized for use. There's a EULA, which basically says for those particular cards that you can't use them for anything other than gaming and crypto mining. And it's one thing to sell them and use them in one particular deal, but your big companies, as you scale with these types of products, there's no person who's going to sign off on that. And in security, our job is to limit liability. And by doing things like that, I find that to be some disingenuous in terms of what our actual goal is, in terms of what we're presenting to the customer, and that's to limit the liability, right? So why leave them exposed on something real or not real? Making sure that the customer is educated to know why, we're providing a specific set of hardware, and also understand what their goal is, and getting it to the point where it meets their needs relative to that particular opportunity.
Yeah, I want to pull in some real world examples of where computer vision are going to challenge the, somebody who's not used to working with it and employing it into your environment. The first question is, are you actually employing into a data center, or are you just dropping it into a closet? Computer vision systems just can't be placed anywhere. They need more cooling, more power, and anything else than you're used to dealing with. It's not just your standard, video recorder and your system to your VMS. It's a different animal. Brian's educated me a ton. I've learned a lot working with him on, how we get through it, but just running into the fact that most of the systems are going to run on, require more voltage than 120. I think there's a big project we all ran into. We've got a few. Ran into a couple of projects where we racked the servers and went to plug them in and was like, oh, wait, we got to call the electricians. So there's a lot of challenges. I think that's probably power draw and just density and just what you need from cooling. I can think of one of our retail customers wanted to put it in their surveillance rooms, which are about 80 degrees, and they decided that they wanted to make sure that it was a well cared for system, so they put it inside of a box. You can't take a rack mount server and put it inside of a wooden box and not start a fire. So there's been some good instances. I think. Can we think of any other ones, Brian, that we've run into?
Yeah, we definitely had power issues, and keeping that in mind, if the system does overheat, there's throttling components that come into effect too, and then you could end up with anomalous behavior on the system and wonder why it's not operating maximum efficiency. It's very, very complicated. When you think about all of the entities involved at getting this, this new technology launched, traditional data center technology kind of had a set of relationships where you had your OEM vendors, your manufacturers of the hardware and software componentry. You had your end user. In many cases, you had a VAR or a company that's very, that's highly specialized in deploying those aspects of the infrastructure, where they can tie different technologies together to come up with an overall solution. In the security space, where we largely see computer vision today, and ultimately that'll mature or evolve into more profit center driven type of technologies that'll drive basically on the same infrastructures. We have not only general purpose vendors that have systems, but now we have unique environmental challenges. We have a whole bunch of software, and many of them are software startup companies that are developing the algorithms to make these things incredibly efficient, very intelligent. They don't all code the same way, right? Some may maximize on Intel processors and maximize everything on the motherboard for memory. Other ones may put more focus on tensor in NVIDIA cards. Some may be very, very heavily memory focused on the GPU. Others balance between the two. Some, will even use memory as a cache for, fast access database tables and things like that. So each system is so incredibly unique. We can spend months with some of the startup companies racking systems, getting them up, running them through test cases and use cases with all kinds of different technology to help them find that best price per stream balance for their systems. And then, we have the software companies, software product companies, they come up with a new version that's efficient. Or we have NVIDIA that comes out with a completely new paradigm in their development environment that helps the algebraic equations become a heck of a lot more efficient. So, and it's changing so incredibly fast. And we also work, outside of, we work really closely with Intel, we work really closely with NVIDIA, but we also work closely with some of the hardware startups too, from Mustang cards to Blaze, companies like that have amazingly efficient coprocessors for AI. And that's a challenge also. So you can imagine standing up a team of developers and you, let's say you don't have a lot of budget. So you run down to Fry's or you run down to Micro Center and you pick up a gamer card in a box and you start developing and then all of a sudden you have a winner, you have a great application and somebody really wants it, but they're not going to put a system like that in. So yeah, Jimmy had mentioned being the incubator. We really focus on being that. We have to be that incubator, and we're also the system builder. And you just can't reach out to Dell. You just can't reach out to NetApp. You just can't reach out to these guys and expect to have all of those little corners filled, with the right kind of light that we have to shine on them to make these things work.
Yeah, as not only do we have to make them work, but the security industry doesn't take time off. It's 365 days a year, 24/7. And to build these high performance computing applications to be able to have that kind of uptime takes experience, expertise. And that's why these things, to just talk about it for a second, that's why these things cost as much as they do. It's not your consumer grade stuff that, if you don't get to play video games for a night, it's not a huge deal. But when your surveillance, if your application that you're running looking, providing some need in your business, be it looking for persons of interest or, running a, people counting or a retail analytic, time is money and downtime is a cost. So we have to design these systems, per your need. And that's another question we need to ask when we bring you in and evaluate your solution of what you need. Some of the stuff will look like overkill compared to anything you've ever seen before, but this software, the requirements and how much compute that's going on is at an order of magnitude that nobody has really seen before at pretty low cost compared to what it was a decade ago.
Also, the benefit of computer vision too. I don't want to make this an AI, anti-computer vision session. For our listeners and viewers, you're probably hearing these, terminologies and this experience and expertise from these three guys. And you're probably thinking to yourself, oh my God, I want to get involved in this because there's so many pieces involved in this puzzle. But this is why it's important to get in touch with guys like at Velasea, like Jimmy, Brian, and Dave here at AnyVision, because they share this wealth of experience, this knowledge that kind of put all those pieces together and make sense for you in your environment. So going off of that, the biggest rebuttal I have when it comes to AI and computer vision is cloud. And I don't want to go too much into cloud, but it's been talked about in the industry forever. People think, cloud's going to be the future. They think COVID-19 is going to speed that up now with the cloud. But what are you guys seeing as a kind of a premier hardware distributor when it comes to a cloud environment, especially an AI environment? What are the challenges you see just from a cloud perspective and a cloud deployment? Jimmy, talk about that further.
So, I can see the cloud having an impact on retention in terms of your typical VMS from a low value information standpoint. But in terms of real time computer vision analytics, it's going to be really tough to do that in the cloud, because you're trying to get seconds, right? I mean, it's preventative, it's reactive at the same time, and ultimately, if someone walks through the door and they're on a list and you miss it by a couple seconds, then it's going to have an effect on your ability to actually perform. So I do believe that computer vision, especially real time, will remain on the edge for quite some time. That doesn't mean that cloud providers aren't going to get involved through some type of appliance of their own or some type of ability to do a hybrid scenario. I could see that occurring. But to me, it just what computer vision is going to provide, and as it advances into marketing, digital signage, and all these things, customer experience. If you look at the casino world, right? So you're going to drive through multiple different types of systems as a person moves throughout an environment, and going back and forth between the cloud with video, especially as you get even heavier 4K, 8K, whatever it might be, the cost of that is just going to be, exponential relative to the reverse happening from a standpoint of NVIDIA with the Jetson products and different types of products that are coming out right now. That's actually driving the edge cost down. There's definitely going to be a place and remain, I think a pretty significant portion of computer vision analytics hanging out on the edge. Now, forensically, I get that. I can understand how forensics can be done in the cloud because it's not as time sensitive. But as computer vision grows, and you mentioned, that you didn't want this to be I don't want to get into that, but we're all going to get into this, right? I mean, everyone's video is going to become more valuable, and in some capacity or not, they're going to eventually be doing this. So it's just a matter of time, not if, not when, or it's for sure. I mean, so whether you get into it now or you get into it a year or not, just know that some capacity of computer vision is going to be present in your world, and it already is. Everybody uses face rec on all different kinds of things, right? Access control is going to become touchless now, right? All the thermal is one of the things, right? So that's a part of computer vision, right? So sensors, all of these things are going to impact customer experience, and then it's going to change people's lives. And as soon as this stuff starts to change people's lives and have a benefit beyond just security, it's going to be widely accepted. And it's just a matter of time before that happens. Internationally, it's already much more comprehensive in terms of how people use these types of things. And the American society has a reluctance due to privacy issues, but eventually all those things go away once the product itself provides a greater value to the consumer than the perceived loss relative to privacy, and that's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I think, another thing driving cloud, I mean, cloud is an inevitability, but there's also a cost for data, right? And there's also latency and bandwidth when it comes to real time. But that cost per data, and if we look at the traditional VMS scenario, we're talking somewhere well north of 99% of the data that's being stored is very, very low value until something happens, right? Until that sudden needle in a haystack appears, and the needle's not even in the haystack until something happens. So either, the cost of storage in the cloud needs to come down so much that it's cost prohibitive to install and manage your own storage in your local data center, or analytics and AI need to become so effective that people can have an extremely high reliability that the data being retained is all of the high value data. When that happens, that cost of the value proposition on what is stored in the cloud goes way, way up. The other thing that the cloud could potentially enable, if we're talking futures and vision and things like that, are data lake scenarios where you may have any number of AI on demand type applications that you may want to analyze your sensor-based data. The fact that we're having a Zoom call right now in real time with no perceived latency, just kind of shows what you can do in real time over the internet. And that's, with the emergence of 5G and, things like what SpaceX is doing with Starlink, the world is going to be connected, and the ability to get to the cloud and have affordability combined with the reliability, the expected reliability of what AI can provide is what we're probably going to see in the next, 3 years or so. And I think there's been some mention of edge devices where all of the compute can't reside in the cloud. There will need to be something on the edge, something doing, some amount of compute on the video before it is transported over the wire, so to speak, into the cloud service. And that's where, Intel, NVIDIA, just to name two, are heavily at work on those affordable edge type components that can sit right behind cameras and let people scale in an affordable way. So there's a few things that are all kind of in a race to converge when it comes to cloud. As far as like traditional VMS, I've seen some of that. It is still cost prohibitive to use a cloud service provider, compared to, say, stacking your own storage. But that's changing rapidly too.
Brian, can I come back to your point there? I think just to clarify for everybody, what we're talking about with the edge is taking all these computer vision analytics and putting them basically in the camera is the simplest way to describe it, or in the sensor. And then you don't have to ship all the data back to be processed. You're just shipping the event to the metadata that's extracted.
Yeah, I'm going to somewhat disagree with that. And the reason I'm going to disagree with that is because the life cycle of the camera is typically 5 to 7 years, meaning, when someone puts a camera out on the edge, right, the cost of replacing that camera and updating that camera is relatively high, whereas the lens is still relatively available for quite some time. While the GPU and the back-end compute on these particular devices is going to change way more rapidly. So when I say the edge, I think more of 4 cameras, 6 cameras, small devices that are either in a NEMA box, depending upon the particular location, that connect to a small number and that are compact, right? They're not servers. There's a lot of different chips that are coming out there, but I think you're correct. In some instances, there will be cameras that hold AI within them. But from the way I look at it is unless they can go out and change the actual device in the camera, it's more cost effective from a long term to have it in a small box disassociated with the camera, depending upon where that camera sits. Because you take the casino environment, if it's high up in the ceiling or on a light pole, wherever it might be, it's much more difficult to access that camera if you need to adjust it, and more expensive than it would be to just connect 3 cameras to a small device.
Right. Yeah. We're going to aggregate the data, extract what we want out of it, and not ship everything back to our solution is where cloud's going to take in. And I'll take it as a key point. I get lobbied by camera manufacturers probably far more than you guys do. But that just aggregating data, pulling information out of it, and then getting that and moving it to, the cloud or something like that for more, aggregating this, metadata together to be able to make it useful is kind of the whole point of what we're talking about. And I think that come back and just highlight one of the key things with computer vision is taking in all this video data that we get, for example, and pulling out, the camera sees 24 hours a day of video, but could you actually just tell me the 10 people that walk by so I know, okay, 10 people a day, who were those people? What were their gender? What was their height? Maybe some other information about that. And then that data could help change the world with putting it into different use cases.
I can totally see it.
If you take the level of sophistication you need on the sensor itself, it's not actually even that high, right? I mean, you could do amazing things with with AI around relatively low resolution images. So I kind of view it like a nervous system of any living thing, and that is the camera is the eyeball. You don't necessarily pack the brain in the eyeball, but the brain is very close to it, right? So it would be, geographically located, for that initial analysis pretty close to those cameras. But man, you could do amazing analytics on very, very low resolution cameras. And if you separate the scalability of those two, then maybe you can put 8 cameras in an environment with lower resolution and get a much better effect on your analytic than you would if you tried to pack it in a super high-end, really expensive single lens camera that you have to perfectly place.
Yeah, and I think the point to all this, guys, is this is about to be our new normal. It already is pretty much our normal with computer vision in general. We're getting to a point in the industry where this is going to be mainstream, where you're going to see assortment different verticals use some form of computer vision on the edge, in the cloud, on-prem. But we're getting to a point in the industry where this is going to be just a normal, an everyday capacity for everyone to utilize in that aspect. So speaking on these technologies that all three of you guys mentioned, facial recognition, thermal detection, proximity checks, people counting, things of that nature. When it comes to having a conversation with an end user, are there certain manufacturers that you guys pretty much stick with when it comes to a certain analytic in the industry, or would like to partner with when it comes to, delivering a solution that's viable in an end user's environment? Jimmy, talk about that for a second. When it comes to, let's say, thermal detection, this has got so much controversy in our industry because of COVID-19. Talk about the vetting process you guys took, Velasea, when it came to providing that right kind of fever, temperature screening process.
Can't call fever detection. You got to call it EBT, right? So
whatever you want to call it here,
yeah,
man. Whatever you want to call it.
It's just one of those things. We partnered heavily with Eddie and MGM. So when they got shut down, it became a focus for those guys, and we put a lot of time into talking to all the people out there, and ultimately, we've sold a couple different solutions, but our primary solution is ICI. And the reason we chose those guys was mainly around the fact that our job, again, is to limit liability. And ultimately, it's a medical device. And the ICI product is world-class, and it existed previous to COVID. It's not a solution that was just spun up on the fly to, pick up some money out in the field, right? It works extremely well. And
FDA approved, I imagine, as well.
Approved.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you have an FDA approved camera and an FDA approved solution. And the reality is should anybody do any ambulance chasings or things of that nature, as an organization, your job is to protect yourself just as much as it is to make sure someone doesn't have a fever coming in the actual, in the office. So to me, people who are making decisions to buy things other than that, I think either number one, don't understand it. Or two, are not doing a proper analysis in terms of understanding what they could potentially be exposing themselves to, or are just simply using it as a placebo, right? So, and I get that, right? If you're going to put up a solution and the purpose isn't necessarily for them to act on it, meaning they provide someone a chance to check their temperature, but and they don't really regulate it from a corporate standpoint in terms of internally, well, then maybe it doesn't matter as much. But if you are regulating people in and out, and you're creating action relative to someone having a positive to that, then it is important to make sure that you're doing it in the right way. And there is no question that this is a medical device. So I wouldn't mess with that. I wouldn't attach it to my network, because then you may have HIPAA requirements. There's all different kinds of things that could come into play. And ultimately, I wouldn't choose a solution that didn't exist pre-COVID, because computer vision is complicated. You can't just build a solution overnight and have it be, what work, right? How many softwares did you want to be the first guy to try, right? It just, think about how many times a update comes out on Microsoft or something like. How long does it take someone to shift over, right? So, these things take years to really build. And ICI's done a really great job. They've won some amazing customers, and they're really great at their support, and the people over there are really great. It's been a really great partnership for us. And like I said, the product works. So, a lot of it comes down to just what's our job in the security market? Limit liability. So you educate people as best you can, you allow them to make decisions, and ultimately you advise them in the case of, if I'm going to limit my liability, I'm going to buy something that's FDA approved and something I know that works.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I don't agree with people using devices like these as a placebo. I've seen and can see where that would cause more harm than good. In the school environment, you have a bunch of kids coming in and getting screened on something that they expect to, be accurate. It may be low, maybe high. Kids can get embarrassed, who knows what the ramifications are with something like that. So predictability is really paramount. And to know that it's gone through the process to have official, sanctioning to be operable on not just hardware, but also a software level is really, really important. To the point that if you can't rely on it, it's probably better not to have it, because the effect of false positives and false negatives are just all negative, in my opinion. It's just not a good road to go down. I've seen that at some really large companies that they were just using handheld scanners and they weren't accurate enough. And so they had to go away from, elevated body temperature detection altogether, just because they felt like it was more of a liability than it was a help. And that company subsequently is actually using, the ICI camera stuff now, because they do have a predictable result. And we've tested a lot of technologies on behalf of our customers. And, just like Jimmy said, that our focus is our customers. And if we can't find a solution that's actually going to meet the need, that we can stake our reputation on it, we're just not going to go there. We just won't go there. But we will spend a lot of time trying to find the right technology to be able to go there.
This is why it's so important to have a holistic perspective when you view security, but only partner with the best of breed technologies in the industry. And I talked about this with Eddie last week. I talked about this with Cherokee Nation. With Cherokee Nation in particular, they were stuck on proprietary systems in the beginning. They had about 5 or 6 different VMS systems throughout all 10 of their properties. Finally, John got some expertise and knowledge from the guys at Milestone, where they consolidated all their properties into the Milestone VMS. Great open platform to interoperate third-party integrations, such as, AnyVision Face Rec, such as people counting, such as thermal detection, whatever you want to call it. But this is ever since COVID-19, guys, man, I feel like there's just been so much bullshit, so much vaporware that's kind of put poison in our industry when it comes to certain technologies, which is why it's so important to partner with guys like Ed Velasea, talk to guys like Dave and myself who actually know this space. And because too many times, God, man, it's that box sell. It's that old school mentality of, yeah, I know it all, or I'm going to use this piece of technology because it's going to be that one size or that one shoe fits all, right? So, thermal detection, it's not the sole solution to COVID-19. It's a layered solution, right? There's always different analytics you can put into play with that piece of technology. So I definitely do appreciate that wealth of experience that Brian and Jimmy just mentioned. And let's talk about Dave Clark here for a second. Let's change this mentality for a second. I mentioned the IceMan name in the beginning of this podcast, and so my listeners and viewers, if you've listened in this far, I want to kind of touch base on that name for a perspective here for a second. So the reason why I call Dave Clark the Iceman is because here at AnyVision, I'm the guy that sells the jobs. The guys that sells our software, makes it look all, high and mighty, looks very professional. But, if I sell a job and for whatever reason our software does not work, then I did not do my job. So why I call Dave Clark the Iceman is because I sell the ice, and Dave's job is to make sure that ice doesn't melt when it comes to the end user. He's the glue to all the kind of analytics, the challenges, pieces that we mentioned here in the computer vision puzzle when it comes to this technology. So Dave Clark, you are the Iceman. You make sure I'm an honest man. You make sure I'm a transparent man. And you were the guy I first met at AnyVision at day one. So I knew what reality was at day one at AnyVision. And it's very important to have guys like you, because you're pretty much my goose, my Batman, Robin, whatever you want to call it, Maverick, whatever terminology you want to call it, but you're my Iceman. So Dave, talk about this further from a pre-sales perspective. I can sell our software, but sometimes clients like to hear from a technical perspective and that kind of architecture perspective. Talk about why that's important to customers and end users.
Yeah, it's critically important, because if a customer doesn't get a solution if it doesn't work for their needs and actually provide value to them, it's not a successful sale. There's no, expansion or growth of the customer, and then there's no, expanding yourself into the market. And as a new company into a new space that needs some hand-holding and some, kind of encouragement to bring people into it, I think we can bring a lot of value, and it's on us to educate and encourage a discussion with a customer and kind of go through the process of what it is, because this stuff isn't turnkey. This stuff isn't plug and play. It is not impossible to use. It's can be quite easy to use, but maybe the installation or the deployment or getting there is a little difficult. It has, different growing pains for each of the different products or at different stages. But I think, make sure you're engaged with your representatives and get to talk to the people. If you have technical questions on how it wants to work, make sure they provide you somebody who can discuss and talk about it. If they're willing to just say it works and not let you try it, play with it, see what it will do for you in your actual environment, don't engage with that solution. Step away from them. Because that's where, we provide that, because my goal is happy customers are the best customers because they're easier to manage after the sale. I don't want to go run around and, dispense matches and then, I don't make recurring revenue to having the fire department. So, we're here, we want to bring people into this and educate them on a new market they're not experienced with and bring them to it, not just a one-time customer and not just for one platform, because we have multiple different platforms we're pursuing, and, we work with different things, and that's all built on, we're just an application layer. We're built on what these guys, gave us in hardware to let us do what we do and do it right, so it goes in and doesn't cause a problem later on.
Nothing but the truth from the IceMan himself. And Jimmy, would you call Brian your IceMan at Velasea? What is Brian's role?
Sure.
Does he keep you honest?
Brian is Brian's definitely the guy that basically does all the back end for us in terms of technology and engineering. So basically he's been my right hand guy in terms of deploying and building this organization as we've gotten to this point. And he's very knowledgeable in terms of what he knows about technology in general, and isn't afraid to roll up his sleeves. And that's kind of the approach that we have. We're very hands-on, very direct with the customer. I mean, I might have a title, but that doesn't mean I'm not willing to do whatever it takes to get from point A to point B, and that's what it requires. If I got to go out to the warehouse every once in a while and help something get done, then that's what I'm going to do. So Brian has that same approach, and that's crucial for being in a company like this that's trying to kind of expand and move into different verticals. You really got to have your key people willing to do whatever it takes, because you got to scale it to the point where you can build some of those roles. And if it comes down to turning a screwdriver or doing whatever he needs to do, Brian's always there to help.
Agreed. And same can be said about Dave. Dave has taught me so much about just computer vision in general, where if I don't have an answer to something, I get it from Dave or try to figure it out myself first. And if I can't figure it out, Dave is there to kind of take care of me from a safety net perspective. So going off this, guys, kind of my last couple questions here on Security VIP as we kind of wrap this up. Speaking of LLC in the future, we mentioned some top verticals. Obviously, gaming's the top vertical for you guys. Brian and Jimmy, talk about some other verticals that are that you guys specialize in, that you guys see the most traction in, but also tell us about the future of the company and where the company's heading now. Jimmy, especially with you as a new president and CEO, what can we expect in the future?
Historically, back in the day before COVID, we were doing quite a bit of retail. COVID's kind of changed that, because you can be honest with you, the retail business isn't what retail business used to be for obvious reasons. Back then I would have said that if you were asked a question in February, it would have been casinos by far and away are number one. Two would have been prisons. We do quite a bit of prison work and have done quite a bit of prison work. And then retail, and anything, in between, depending upon the security integrator that we particularly work with in certain circumstances. That's beyond the fact that we do focus on ISVs in the computer vision space and assisting them. So our core competency is still really about understanding the software company, the use cases within them, and helping them deploy their particular software. So if you're talking verticals in terms of who we actually end up providing the product to, that's primary it. Healthcare now has become a big one, thanks to COVID. We've done quite a few thermal deployments there, and their adoption of computer vision is going to expand pretty rapidly. So we see that as being a big vertical for us going forward. Education now as well. So there's the pre-COVID and post-COVID kind of answer to that. I do think retail will come back, and loss prevention and things of that nature will still be a big factor, but it's going to take some time, right? Because obviously they got hit pretty hard. In the future, staying ahead of the game is really our goal. From an overall organizational perspective, my goal is to really significantly grow this company. Otherwise, what am I doing in this chair? So expansion is key, and hiring grade A people is a really cool thing for us. I focus on making sure that the people who we bring into this organization fit the model that we have, which is very customer focused, and being on the front end and willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that experience for the customer is a healthy one, and building it on solid relationships. So we've been successful for 20 years, and I believe that that's going to continue. So, Brian, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say, no, that's great. From the propeller heads side of things, in futures, we're really focused on high performance computing. If you want to generalize it, it's the emerging technologies and chips that are, people can programmatically, make things that have yet to actually exist. So we're really focused there, down, like I said, down to the chip level with companies like Intel and NVIDIA and some other companies too that develop those things. There's other verticals that have a strong need for emerging technologies and different ways of deploying those. So, some of the things that we've started focusing on and paying attention to are, first responder type environments, where you may actually start incorporating robotics and different vehicles that will use sensors. Another thing, I like to look at things as project-based, and I love to work on projects that I think, are kind of painting a picture for the future. And one of those around like thermal sensors and using them as a proof of life sensor, or incorporating them into, a safety and security type environment where it's additive to what people use their environments for today. So for example, we start using facial recognition for access control. Another thing that can be added to that would be a thermal system that would be proof of the individual or the living being that's actually being detected and allowed access to an environment. If you combine that with what's happening with the pandemic, you could have a mode on those systems that are basically like a pandemic mode. And I don't know, is the future going to be where, those sensors are ubiquitous in every environment, so that if there is an outbreak of even flu or anything like that, we can, quickly recognize those things and maybe mitigate it to a geography. I don't know, but thinking about those things and thinking about how to scale those systems and making them deployable to the, to the general population is something that we're focused on from a future. We also work a lot on system design. A lot of pieces of hardware out there just simply don't exist. So, we go to the metal bender sometimes, and we've actually developed custom carts and have them built in the warehouse for some of our unique solutions, just because they have not been invented or provided for, some of the things that people are demanding out there. I would say another, big vision that we're starting to work towards is having proving grounds. And Taylor, you would ask, what are some of these technology demands around AI and computer vision and things like that? I think what people would really love to have and what's actually available are two completely different things in many cases. You watch CSI and you see, people are like, we want it to do that. We want to look at a crowd of 100,000 people, and once you've, counted one of them, I want you to make sure you don't count that person again. And if you think about that algorithmically, you're talking about some pretty serious horsepower to manage, 100,000 unique faces in a crowd. We're going to get there. We definitely will. But, managing those expectations and then bringing them into an environment where we can actually proof them, so people, ahead of making a decision on an investment like that, they actually know the effectiveness of the systems that they're putting in. So we want to be more and more a part of that when we operate as an incubator to help our software partners develop absolutely the best of breed type systems. And there's so many opportunities around AI and computer vision and things that people haven't even thought of yet, what you could do with with a set of cameras and some compute. The future is really bright for that stuff.
A lot of good points that Brian brought up there, and so did Jimmy. So definitely some exciting things to come out of Velasea as the company as a whole. Definitely looking forward to the advancements, involvements in technology that you guys are going to be kind of pioneering us forward. And Dave, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to leave these final comments to you, man. Leave it to the IceMan. Any kind of summary or commentary you want to wrap up here on Security VIP?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, everybody, thanks for making it to the end. Just computer vision's got a very big, complex, not well-defined. Don't find any solution that fits in a box. If it does fit in a box, you probably don't want it. Engage with the partners, do some research, and then, put it into your environment and see if it meets your needs. It's still a solution that definitely deserves, a test drive before you commit to it. And then just, be open. Different solutions meet different criteria. I work for, one vendor, we do something really well, but we don't do some other things. And we have to, if your vendor doesn't say, no, I don't do that, be cautious. If they say yes, that we can do everything, that's a warning sign. That's Taylor and I have been working on that one. And it's definitely a total violation of the stay in your lane principle. So, appreciate the opportunity and, look forward to working with more people in the industry as we, develop and bring this out there and get it out and make it easy enough to use for everybody to get their hands on it.
Nothing but the truth, again, from the IceMan himself. And I'm an honest guy. I make sure things are honest and make sure things are reality. So those snake oil salesmen out there, those are the guys that say yes to everything. But I don't say yes to everything because I consult with guys like Brian, Jimmy, and Dave to make sure that we're providing a viable solution that actually works, right? So wrapping up here, Velasea, guys, if you're not familiar with the company, I highly encourage you guys to check them out on their website as well as LinkedIn. Two other people want to recognize at Velasea, not just Brian and Jimmy. I also want to recognize Vita and also Evelyn at the company. Those two females are nothing but sweethearts, but also they're experts too at the company. And guys, what I love about Velasea is they're so responsive. Like it's crazy how fast you get a response out of these guys. And when an industry where time is everything and speed kills, Velasea's got the answer for you, and they'll give you an answer pretty much. I mean, shit, man. I had an answer. I needed a question answered in like 5 minutes, and Evelyn got it done just like that. So a big shout out to the team there at Jimmy has over there at Velasea. Very top-notch professionals over there. So guys, please check Velasea out when you have some time. And for those that have questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me at info@securityvip.net. Once again, that's info@securityvip.net. You can check us out on LinkedIn to follow us all the recent updates about our VIP guests. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to see this episode of Dave, Jimmy, and Brian. And when you're on the road, tune in to Spotify.com to hear this episode of all four of us. Thank you guys again for hopping on. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks, guys.